Welcome to Breaking Down Patriarchy. I'm Amy McPhie Allebest. The Dalai Lama once said, "Once your mind is calm and full of love, there is no room for hatred or fear. Others will trust you because of your open heart." This quote opens the book Parenting with Pride by Heather Hester, and it resonates deeply with the mission of Breaking Down Patriarchy. And yet, finding access to that calm and loving perspective isn't always easy. As much as we try to be centered and accepting, sometimes unexpected challenges appear and we don't know how to move forward at all, let alone with a calm mind and an open heart. Today, we're going to talk about one of those unexpected plot twists in particular, finding out that your child isn't cisgender or isn't straight. The challenges faced by LGBTQ youth are tremendous, and we've talked about these challenges multiple times and we'll continue to talk about them. But today we're going to look instead at the challenges faced by the parents of these amazing kids. After all, no child comes with an instruction manual, and sometimes parents of LGBTQ kids are left flailing, trying to understand and embrace their children, but without guidance and trying to keep them safe in unfamiliar waters. Fortunately, however, there is support out there, like this fabulous new book that I just mentioned, Parenting with Pride, Unlearn Bias and Embrace, Empower, and Love Your LGBTQ plus Teen by Heather Hester. And I'm very happy to welcome Heather to the podcast today to talk about these unique hurdles faced by these parents, and also how we can all learn to be better allies in supporting queer youth and their families. So thank you so much for joining us today, Hester. Thank you so much for joining us today, Heather.
Thank you for having me. That is seriously one of the most common things that happens. And I always giggle because I had a friend when I first years ago when I changed my name, when I got married, that would call me Hester from Hester Prim, thought that was the most hysterical thing. And now I think that reading that book is a little more rare.
Yeah.
People don't quite get it, but I still giggle whenever it happens
Oh,
because
that's funny.
it's very common. So yes, but thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Heather Hester is the founder of Chrysalis Mama, which provides support and education to parents and allies of LGBTQIA adolescents, teenagers, and young adults. She's also the creator and host of the Top 1% podcast, Just Breathe, Parenting Your LGBTQ Teen. As an advocate and coach, she believes the coming out process is equal parts beautiful and messy. She works with her clients to let go of fear and feelings of isolation so that they can reconnect with themselves and their children with awareness and compassion. Heather also works within organizations via specialized programming to bring education and empowerment with a human touch. She's delighted to announce that her first book is out in the world as of May 2024, Parenting with Pride, Unlearn Bias and Embrace, Empower, and Love Your LGBTQ plus Teen, which we'll be talking about today. Married to the funniest, I love this sentence, Heather, married to the funniest guy she's ever known, and the mother of 4 extraordinary kids, 2 of whom are LGBTQ, and 1 sassy mini Bernedoodle, Heather believes in being authentic and embracing the messiness. You can almost always find her with a cup of coffee nearby, whether she's at her computer, on her yoga mat, or listening to her favorite music. That is lovely. Thank you for that introduction, Heather. And I'd love for you to start us off by telling maybe a little bit more about yourself and specifically the personal journey that brought you to write this book. Why was this book necessary for you in your life?
Sure. So, I've always been a writer. That's what kind of my love has been, my passion has been. And I did freelance writing for a long time, but it was more corporate. And that's as I was raising my kids when they were little, that's what I was doing. But I've always loved to write. And so I knew at some point in my life I would write a book. That was kind of on the bucket list of things to do. And I love books. I was complimenting you on your book. That is if you could ever get me a gift, like books are it. I love them. And so that is, that was always like the goal. Now, when my son came out as gay and, we began that journey with him, and I know we'll talk about this, more as we get into the podcast, but I got to a point where I realized that I wasn't finding what I needed. Like I couldn't find there were great books on like here's like kind of the more clinical, like here's what's going on, or here's what to do, but in a sense that I was like, that's not what I'm looking for. Like that's not what I need. And are there other people out there that are like going through these like layers of challenges, right? Because there's just like
Mhm.
layers of things, and we had many layers that like all at once showed themselves. So about 18 months in, I realized that I've been journaling this whole time, like as we were going through all this stuff. I'm like, I could actually take all of this that I've been writing and turn it into a book. And, before anybody questions or wonders, yes, Connor and my kids have all been on board with me writing about them and talking about this. I have put everything that I put out there goes by them first.
Mm.
So if it's anything that might be questionable.
Mhm.
um, so yeah, so as I then started putting the book together, I started writing an outline and I started working, and then the pandemic hit. So I just shelved it and I was like, well, we'll get to that later because there's so many other things going on in the world. And then 2 years ago, I met somebody who was like, you should have a book. I want to introduce you to my publisher. And
Wow.
yeah, I mean, it was like one of those, it was meant to happen in that time.
Mhm.
And I feel I'm still so very grateful to Familialist, because they took on something that they typically do take books that are more children's books. And so this was something that was a little bit out of their realm to take
Mhm.
on as a project. And so grateful that they did. It was such an incredible process. And I'm so proud of it. And I'm so grateful that it is out in the world as something that is both um, tells a story, but also provides, I think, very actionable, practical strategies, steps, tips, all of the above.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say too for any listeners who have an LGBTQ child or um family member or friend or anyone you love, this is so, so helpful. So definitely do check out this book. And I agree, there are more like, social media accounts with some helpful tips and strategies and stuff. And like, here's what you might be tempted to say. Here's what you could say instead. There's starting to be more material like that, but still not enough. So I'm so grateful that you published your
Yeah,
experiences and all of this wisdom. It
me
really,
too.
really
Well,
helps.
and I think, it's funny that you say that because I think had he come out now and I had
Mm.
access to all the social media that's out there, right? That I had access because Trevor Project has been around all these years and
Mhm.
PFLAG has been around all these years and Gilson and all these wonderful major national foundations. They had websites or they had like little
Right.
tiny presences here and a lot of it's geared, wasn't geared necessarily toward like helping the parent help their child, right?
Right. Yes.
So that's where I was like, well, there's a need. Like I just saw such a need, and I'm still working to fill that in a way that I believe is still necessary.
Yeah, it really is. Well, let's start from the beginning. Maybe you can talk with us first about the coming out process and what guidance, I guess my question would be, what guidance would you offer for parents whose child has recently come out or
Mm,
they have sometimes you just have a feeling and it's coming, so you think their
sure.
child might be coming out soon.
Sure. Yeah, so I think that understanding that there's a process was one of the most amazing things that I learned. And it was, we learned about it probably 6, 8 months into, after Connor had come, officially told us he was gay. But once I started learning, so there's basically 6 steps to the coming out process. And once I started like learning what they were, and this is why it's really helpful for parents wherever you are in the process, wherever your child is in the process, but to really understand what they are, because then you understand why they're doing some of the things they're doing or saying or behaving or feeling, all of the things, right? It just
Mm,
helps give you such a deeper understanding of what they're going through, how they're feeling. Like one of the most extraordinary things to me to find out was that Connor, he was 16 when he came out to us. He had known since he was 13.
Mm.
And he was going through like those first two steps, like realizing, being in denial, going back and forth for 3 years by
Yeah.
himself with no one, and I think about that. It like makes me teary,
Yeah.
and he laughs at me now, but just the thought of like those years are awful enough without having that on top of it. Right. So I think for parents having that understanding of like, child's probably like in stage 3 or 4 by the time they tell you, but to understand like this is what they've gone through. Like this wasn't like they woke up on a Tuesday morning and they're like, I think I might be gay. It's something that they have thought about,
Yeah.
deeply wrestled with, negotiated with, like all the things. Because, and I will say this to any person who argues with me that it's a choice, if you have ever known anyone who has come out, whether it is gay, lesbian, transgender, non-binary, any of the beautiful orientations or identities, that's not a choice. Them realizing who they are and like wrestling with that and then kind of coming to terms with it, it is an extraordinary and oftentimes terrifying thing to be witness to and to support someone through. And oftentimes, as was in our case, just trying to keep them alive, right, long enough to be able to like kind of
Mm.
get to those next stages of like
Yeah.
understanding. And so I just would highly recommend, if nothing else, that to have an understanding. And I can give you great links to where parents and people in general can learn more. I'd write about it in the book as well, but um just an important thing to know, because then you can
Yeah.
kind of sit back and be like, okay, this is what kind of support they might need. I
Yeah.
would say the other thing that we found kind of down the road was when there becomes, one of the stages is pride, like when they're like, yeah, this is who I am, I'm very excited, and they start embracing everything. And then they become very, whether it's angry or just
Mm.
like filled with like all of the, because that's fully who they are, that is their one personality trait that they are focused on, and nothing else in that at
Mm.
that point matters. And so I think it's really important as parents to realize this is just where they are right now. This isn't like that they've lost the rest of who they are. It's just they're finally saying, oh my gosh, like this is cool and good. And I'm realizing what's going out in the greater world having to do with who I am. And I'm super angry about it, or passionate, or I want to do all these things. So I think as the parent, being able to kind of recognize that and, you know, get supports in place, or just know that you can kick your partner under the table every time it happens because you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. I do think that is so, so helpful. And just thinking of people actually in my personal life that I've been through the process with, multiple experiences just have been coming to my mind. And yeah, I sure wish I had known both of those things actually too. Like to know that it's kind of like a tip of the iceberg moment, like that moment that you find out that that's their identity or their orientation or something. Like it's new information for you, but it is not new information for them, and it represents, like you said, this massive amount of probably turmoil
Mhm.
that they've been going through for a while. I wish I'd known that. And yes, the other thing, I've seen that, and it was actually a little bit worrying to me to see this person that I care about a lot, and just to be like, where's the person that I knew before? And they've become a little bit like almost, yes, just so, I don't want to say fixated because that sounds so negative, but yes, so very focused on that
Mhm.
one element of who they are that I was quite disoriented by that for a little while, and just like, should I be worried about this? Is the whole self gonna come back at some point? And I wish I'd known that. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. Well, I mean, again, that was something that I knew in time for my second one, but not for Connor, right? Like we were
Mm,
kind of smack dab in the middle of that. And I was like, oh,
mm.
and, you know, a lot of times it coincides with them being teenagers. So it's hard
Yeah,
to kind of
true.
split apart like what's developmentally appropriate behavior and what is like what they're dealing with, like part of
Yeah,
their, like they're just figuring this stuff out. So again, the
yeah,
layers.
yeah.
Yeah.
Something that just occurred to me this moment too, that maybe listeners can help listeners to kind of have empathy. Another time that I've seen this is when women have a feminist awakening, actually. And then everything is about gender. Everything is about sexism. Everything is about patriarchy. And that's all they can see for a while.
Yep.
And that part of their identity is like, oh my gosh, I've been oppressed. And that's all they can think about. So maybe if that's happened to you as a straight woman, like as a listener, that you can go like, oh, okay. And eventually you get your whole self back online, but for a while there's this discovery process, and that does become like the most important, the most acute pain point, the most important thing, and then you have pride that that you're a woman. Anyway, does that sound
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, I
relevant?
love that you said that actually, yes, because I think that is so true. And I've thought about this, you know, many, many times in the past 8, 10 years, because I had my own kind of parallel process going on, as far as like where I, you know, how I had grown up and the things that I was taught to think and believe growing up. And then as I
Mm-hmm.
was like kind of had slowly been shifting, but this was like a massive shift. Like this just sped everything up. So in a lot of ways, like I kind of had some parallel things going on where I was like,
Mm,
like, you know, politically,
yeah.
I mean, religion, absolutely. Like I had a whole deconstruction process and I didn't realize that was a thing. So like
Mm,
being like, oh, that's what that is. But kind of to your point, like everything feels very big and it's like the pendulum. I think of it as like a pendulum. Like it swings like way, you know, to whatever direction where you're feeling all of this and learning about it. And that's where you are. And
yeah.
then once it kind of settles and integrates, then you're
Yeah.
like, okay, yeah,
Yeah. It's a big important part of who I am, but it's not all consuming in all of
exactly.
my thoughts. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, I have another question specifically about parenting. So I watched, I don't remember the title of this comedy show, but it's Hannah Gadsby. She's an Australian comedian and she's lesbian. And it was a hilarious comedy show. So if you haven't seen Hannah Gadsby, look up Hannah Gadsby. She's fantastic. But she tells this little anecdote about her mother. So when she came out to her mother was actually really understanding and loving. And then she started to cry and she said, I have, maybe it wasn't in the moment. Sorry. I'll, so that Sam doesn't have to edit this. I'm going to modify that slightly. Sorry. So Hannah Gadsby tells a story about her mother. And at some point after she had come out to her mother, and her mother was very loving and supportive, but later, I think as it was kind of setting in for her, she said, I so wish that I hadn't raised you as if you were straight. I regret that I didn't know how to raise a gay child. I raised you as if you were straight. And that really hit me, that anyone who is straight themselves and has been raised in such a heteronormative environment, that like our generation, I feel like you didn't even really talk about queerness. You just didn't talk
Mm-mm,
about it.
mm-mm.
And so for these parents who are like, okay, I love my child, and you get this information, but you're like, I don't know how to raise a queer kid. I just wanted to frame it because that was kind of the story that came to my mind. What are some of the most
I love
significant
that.
challenges that parents of queer kids face as opposed to parents of straight and cisgender kids?
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, that's such a great, I love that the way that the mother phrased that because it is so very true and that is such a great articulation of how I think every parent of a, you know, straight cisgender parent of a child who does come out feels like I don't know how to do this. And
Yeah.
and I like to think that the majority of parents are like, I don't know how to, but I want to learn how to. So I think that there there is a ton of education that goes in, and the parent really has to be like, okay, I'm like ready to go. Like I have to learn. So there are things that I think depending again on the age that completely sorry um, it it depends on where they are, whether they're like younger adolescent, teenager, early adulthood, but certainly dating and
Mm-hmm.
sex. And that is one of the biggest things that, especially if you have, like my son being gay, I could talk to him all day long about straight sex, but I did not know the first thing about how to prepare him to be safe in the world. So it takes, and I think too, for our generation, like we're very much of like, I don't know, should I talk about that? Like, can I say that? That feels kind of weird to say that. And like, so there's this whole piece of like becoming comfortable with understanding how things work, understanding how to make sure not only are our kids knowledgeable, because if we don't have the information for them, they're going to find it. They will go out there and find it. And
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, it's going to be in a way that's not safe. And which is what happened to us. And so I think that is such an important thing to learn about. And just kind of, I talk about being uncomfortable a lot in what I do, because it is uncomfortable, but it's when you're uncomfortable, that means you're growing. And so I just say, like, just move through it. Like, just know you're going to be uncomfortable. Know that you're going to, read things that you're like, ooh, I didn't know that. And, just all kinds of things like that. So I would say just be prepared to learn, to find the information specific to your child's orientation or identity, or both. Be ready to be uncomfortable. Be ready to ask questions. Find someone that you can ask questions to, whether it's a therapist, a social worker, a coach. Listen to podcasts. Ask questions to your favorite podcasts. There are so many ways that you can, kind of like go to, all these wonderful organizations. A lot of them will, email you back if you send very direct questions. So that's kind of my biggest. I mean, I know that's not very overwhelmingly amazing,
No,
but
no, that is. No, that's great. And the truth is we're telling people like go out and get this book. Honestly. And we will have the links to some resources on our website too for
yes,
listeners who want to just quickly look up. But what I'm hearing you saying also, Heather, is like pretty much that education process needs to happen quickly. As soon as you have this information,
oh
because it's
yes,
likely, as you're saying, that your child has already been looking online for stuff. And so
yes,
taking their hand and being like, let's learn together from really trustworthy sources is really important.
yes.
And you got to get out in front of that as fast as you can.
Yes, and I will tell you, just I do have on my website a resource page that has quick links to everything that like all
Perfect.
of these different topics. So, by all means go there and just like click through, and it'll be
Yeah.
faster for you. And I would say, yeah, and it doesn't, again, like it doesn't matter what age they are, whether they're 10, 15, 20, 25. Sit down with them and do it, because
Mm-hmm.
otherwise they are going to be, getting on Grindr. They're going to be Googling stuff. And there are people out there that are just sitting and waiting to take advantage of these kids. So
Mm.
just, buckle up, be
Yeah.
prepared. It's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
And advocate when necessary. If you feel in your gut, like when you're with your child, that there is something, whether it's you need to advocate at school, whether you need to advocate with a doctor, or a therapist, if you need to get a professional involved, do it. Don't sit around and like question if that feeling's right or not. It's right. Just do it.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
One thing that I really appreciated about this book is that it takes what can feel like an enormous, overwhelming topic and it breaks it down neatly into 4 pillars. I love a well organized book. It's very, very helpful. So you write about these 4 pillars: embrace, educate, empower, and love.
Hmm.
And of course, we want listeners to go out and pick up the book. So you don't have to you know, share all of the spoilers. But I wonder if you could just speak briefly to each of these pillars and why they're so critical for parents?
Sure, absolutely. Yes. So actually a couple of years before I wrote the book, I had come up with these pillars because I was looking for a way to, like you, I like things organized. So I was looking for a way to organize my website and organize, just these different things that I'd been writing about and, articles that I would find and all of these good things. And as it kind of came into focus, it was basically what it is like the order of really parenting well, parenting your child, your LGBTQ child well. And honestly, it works with all kids, but it's really specifically geared towards your LGBTQ kids. So the whole idea is, embracing whatever is at hand, right? So in this case, it's my child has come out, and really understanding what that means for your child, what that means for you, what work you need to do, what work they need to do. And then it moves into educate and unlearn bias. And I added in unlearn bias actually when I was writing the book because I, as I was writing things and researching, I realized that a lot of my process was unlearning things that I had learned. And that was true for so many people that I worked with as well. And I thought, well, this is something, let's just like to get rid of the stigma here, because I think so many times people hear the word bias and they're like, oh my gosh, you're pointing fingers. We all have them, right? So it's like a way of just, we all have biases. Just be okay with that
Yep.
and know that you're going to have to work through something. And that's okay. That's part of being human. And so that was like a nice extra added layer to, just like the education of the coming out process for the parent, which is a thing and really important to embrace. And then I talk a lot about, mental health and substance use and support systems and all of that type of thing. And then empowering is, really just exactly what it sounds like, the steps that we go through to empower ourselves, to become empowered so that we can empower our children. And then, of course, my belief is that we cannot truly understand nor give unconditional love without all the other pieces. So, really understanding the true meaning of unconditional love was such a fun thing for me to realize. And I think every parent wants to give that to their child, right? And so I think that is something that's really important. It's an action. It's something that we, actively do and actively have to work through our own things so that we can do in the best way possible.
Yeah, thank you for that. Um, let's see. Let me see where we are in the questions. Um, okay, yeah, this is a good one too. After reading the book, it seems like the changes and the challenges which come with raising an LGBTQ child can bring some discomfort for parents. Again, especially, I think we're going through like this generational change, is what I feel, where we are finally like talking about it, embracing it. Our laws have changed, at least here in the United States and in many countries through the world, though some countries are just woefully really behind in that process. And that's a different conversation we could have. But I feel like, again, like the way I feel is like the world I lived in as a child is so different from the world I live in now. And so the parents of queer kids now are figuring this out as we go with no role models and examples. And so this is extremely uncomfortable, probably because we were raised, again, like I said, in such a heteronormative environment with so
Mm-hmm.
many biases, oftentimes, especially those of us who come from conservative religions, especially. And so a parent can just be like, I'm out floating in space. I don't even know, like up from down here. And like getting out beyond our comfort zone feels really, really scary. So I
Yeah.
guess, do you have any tools for that specific thing, that fear, and especially like the fear of like it's one thing if I make a mistake with my child and it's like, oh, I told him this factual, inaccuracy. And now I can go back and be like, oh, sorry, told you that happened in that year. And it was actually that year, like super low stakes making a mistake like that. But if you make a mistake that hurts your child, it is terrifying. Nobody wants to do that. So, what are some tools that you could offer parents as they navigate that scary, unfamiliar landscape where the stakes are pretty high?
Yeah. Yes. Oh my goodness. I love that you, thank you. That was such a great example to bring up because I think that is something, um, well, it happens to all of us, but it's something that our generation, I think, of parents are really beginning to learn what to do. And that the biggest thing is taking accountability, and accountability is hard. But I think in that, to your example that you just gave, especially if it was pre them coming out or while we're learning, even once we have learned, we're going to say dumb things,
Yeah.
right? You're going to make a mistake. You're going to, whether it's, not using the right pronouns, or whether it's making a observational comment that you're like, oh, that was so dumb. Why did I do that? Because you're still working through your stuff. You're still this stuff that is just so ingrained that you don't even realize it's there. It takes pulling apart, and it is work. It is really hard work. And while you are doing that hard work, you are going to make mistakes. You are going to say stupid things. And I think that every single time, the minute that you catch yourself and the minute you can acknowledge that and be like, oh my goodness, I am so sorry. I am still doing my work, and I apologize that hurt you. Um, and so I think that is the first, like, just again, it's that whole discomfort thing. It is so very uncomfortable, but also give yourself some grace. Like, this is not going to happen overnight. Learning all of this doesn't happen overnight. Becoming comfortable with all of it does not come, overnight. And working through all of your stuff, especially depending, on the layers that you have going for you, does not happen overnight. The fear is very real. And the fear can be about, the future, the uncertainty, the not understanding, the not knowing, the what ifs. And typically, fear is stuff that we can't control. And I think that one of the most helpful things in initially working with fear and working through fear is naming it, really understanding what those things are that you are afraid of. And I'm, again, a very big proponent of writing things down, because I think writing through things super helpful. And I actually give a ton of journal prompts in the book for doing
Yeah.
exactly this, because it is
Yep.
so very helpful to go through this. There is the brain, writing with your hands is there's the brain writing connection. So do that. Try that. See how that works for you, I think would be another big thing. And I would say my third thing that really worked well for me, and I know works well for many, and it's something everyone can do, it does not take money, is learning how to meditate. And
Mm,
meditation comes in a million different forms. It doesn't mean that you have to sit still and clear your mind. In fact, that's not really possible to do. But what it does do is it helps you become very aware of your thoughts. It helps you become very aware of what's going on around you. And it helps you stay present. And so it gets you out of the past stuff and the future worry. And it helps you stay right where you are in this moment, which helps you be more present for your child, which again is, the ultimate goal, especially if your child is in crisis or struggling in any way.
yeah. Well, you even include a whole section on self-care
I
in the
do.
book, and that
Yeah.
was surprising and interesting to me, and then I was like, "Oh my gosh," and it's for, I think, the very reason that you just said,
Yeah.
for our own mental health, for us as parents or for us as, adults who love these kids.
Yeah.
But also because that is critical to enable showing up in in the right way that they need, right?
It is. It is. And it also models to them the importance of doing that.
Yes,
So it
true.
teaches them, right? Like we didn't learn that these things were good for us and really important to do until much later in life. And I always
Yeah.
think, gosh, you guys are learning how to do this as teenagers and young adults. And how great is that? Like that's just
Yeah.
such a gift that we can give them. And again, don't worry about perfect. There's no such thing.
Yeah. Do you have any specific tips in addition to meditation that you
Sure.
recommend for parents?
For
For
just
self-care,
for
sorry. For
self-care, sorry.
yeah. No, I'll rephrase that. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah,
No,
sorry.
that's okay. That's okay. I talk a lot about kind of what my, listing out the things that I love to do. So the things that really help, the best way to think about it is when you think about what helps you refill your cup, so to speak, that helps you just show up better in the world. What are those things? So I think having that right kind of in your side pocket of, well, if I want to show up better right in the present, then okay, I can take like 10 minutes to meditate at the beginning of my day. Or, you know what, I have a lot more, I can really just, my mind is more clear. I can work better. I can show up better all day long for all my people if I work out, if I go for a 5 mile run every morning. If I'm super, super stressed out, do I need to like really do some deep internal nervous system work? Or do I need to go get a massage? Do I need to just go for a long walk or have a conversation with my best friend? Or so it's really figuring out what, and there's so many, like there's like obviously the very surface level of self-care, right? I run out and get a manicure, I run out and get a massage, right? Or is it like the deeper levels of like what is that, like figuring out where this is all coming from? That's self-care. So making your own personal list of like your levels, like what is like just top level, I can do this really quick, or what's like, this is my goal for the next 3 months. I really want to do this work. And how do I do that? So that would be, I know that's not very succinct and
No,
it's not
that's great. No,
yeah.
no, no, no. That's perfect. And I'll just throw in, and maybe Sam, you can decide whether to keep this in or even move it earlier. Cause it's just as I'm like sitting with this, it's just really sinking in how important that is too. Because like you just mentioned a couple minutes ago, especially if your child is in crisis, I just think of times where my children have gone through difficult things. And sometimes the way that manifests is a lot of anger. It can be
Mm-hmm.
anger that's directed at me sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's not
Oh,
about me, it's direct, or I'm just there and I'm the safe person. And so the anger comes at me.
right.
A lot of emotion, and that can take the form of depression and sadness. And I just know at every stage of parenting my kids, if one of my kids is encountering like huge emotions like that, if
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really centered,
Yeah.
that can sometimes overwhelm me. And then I'm not at my best as a parent in the moments that they need me to be my best the most.
Right.
It can be really challenging. So it's just sinking in even more as you're talking about that, actually, how critical it is to take care of ourselves
Yes. Yes.
because it
And
can be
again, I
intense.
think that is something that is really just becoming in our generation of parents and kind of, on the latter end, right, as our kids are getting a little bit older, like realizing how vital this is and how vital it is to take care of ourselves, and that it's not selfish to take care of ourselves. It's actually selfish to not take care of
Yes.
ourselves. And
Yes.
so it is, I think I made a whole, chapter or part of a chapter in the book about this because it was something that I realized later in life and later in parenting, that I was like, oh, if I had known this earlier, right? Like if I had known that if I take better care of myself, if I take those moments, then I don't feel as beat up when kind of, something like that happens, like your example, right? Or I don't like freeze when something like that happens,
Yeah.
or like I'm able to be fully present and
Yeah.
I'm able to be fully calm and just hold that space for them when they need it. So it is so critical to figure out what it is that works for you and to have all of your tools lined up and ready to go.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, let's look at some specific scenarios. And I'm thinking first, because of my own personal background and context, thinking first about parenting or thinking first about parents from conservative religious backgrounds that might
Mhm.
have been taught and absorbed negative beliefs about LGBTQ people. If, for all of these adults that grew up in pews hearing actively
Mhm.
homophobic things, what would you most like for those parents to know?
Mm.
How can they bridge that distance to be there for their queer or questioning children?
Right. Well, I will say that that was me too. I grew up in a pew and a lot of my young adulthood as well. And I remember when the night that Connor came out to us, and it was in quite dramatic fashion, but I remember being on the phone with him as he was telling me and thinking, there's no way this child is going to hell. That just can't be
Mm.
possible. It cannot be
Mhm.
true. And I
Mhm.
need to understand this, because so many of these things that we hear and were taught as, as we grew up in the pew, right? And my grandfather was a Church of God minister. So like I get it. It's a lot. I found, and not everybody, everybody has their own experience with this, but my personal, when that happened, I was like, I just need to understand this better, because I think that I really didn't question what was being taught. So it was very much this, like, I would say it is okay to question. That doesn't make you not a Christian. It doesn't make you a bad person. Um, and it is okay to seek information, and I will even go as far to say seek truth, because what I found is that the verses that are used, there are 6 of them, they're called the Clobber verses, and are really actually very mistranslated, and kind of to the point of the name of your podcast. It's very patriarchal. And the more that you kind of pull it apart and understand that there were very specific reasons that the men who did these translations, added these words in and changed the wording of things for the time where they were in history. I mean, it's fascinating. If this is kind of your thing that you like to learn about, it's really a fascinating lesson in history, specifically, biblical history.
Yep.
But that's what I did. I mean, that was literally one of my very first questions when I met with our first therapist was, I am terrified my child is going, like, he can't go to hell. I just need to
Mm.
understand. And so just sought out, like, book after book after book after resource after, I just called people that I found and, like, talked to all these different people. So I would say to you, if this is you, like, it is okay. You are not alone in feeling this way and feeling very confused and feeling frightened. And there's a ton of information out there to help you through this. And it is my very strong belief that our children are not going to hell. And so I will just say that is
Mhm.
the end there of that. But
Mhm.
there's a lot in between. So if you're curious, again, on my website, I have links to all these, my favorite resources on this topic.
Yeah, wonderful. And I'll say for any listeners, because my particular background is in the Mormon tradition. And so
Mhm.
there's like different flavors of homophobia that you get in like Pentecostal Christianity versus Mormonism versus traditional Islam or Judaism, or all the different religions have their own
Yeah, yeah.
versions. And yeah, for Mormons who haven't yet heard of Lift and Love, that's a wonderful social media account. And Circle is wonderful. And yeah, so I'm sure there's like initiatives that are specifically tailored for each kind of religious tradition. And those
Mhm.
Christian kind of like sola scriptura denominations that are like, well, if it's in the Bible, then that means it's God's word. So to your point, like it would be very, very important to those translation histories and like, why is this in the Bible? Who actually wrote this and when, and what was their, kind of like vested interest or their angle on translating it a certain way. That would be a very, very important resource, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it is fascinating. It was such a fascinating thing for me, kind of in that a part of our journey. And I will also say, obviously I shifted a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and just my eyes were opened a lot. And I feel like, I'm delighted. Um, but there are people in my life who, did not shift. And so
Mm,
that does happen too. So just know that that will
yeah.
happen, and there's nothing that you can do about it.
Yeah.
And that is okay. And, there are ways to still have relationship and figure things out. It just, I think for a long time I thought, well, I'm shifting. Why aren't they? Like,
Yeah.
this is their family member.
Yeah.
So, then you get kind of past that and you're like, all right, well, that makes
That's
me
gotta
sad.
be,
But
oh
that's
yeah.
their thing, right? Like,
Right.
that's theirs. And you
Right.
cannot control any other person's response to anything. You can only control your own. So,
Right. I
yeah,
mean, that's gotta be the hardest, one of the hardest parts in the aftermath is like, who is my child safe around? And if it's
correct.
your own, like you're implying, like sometimes it's grandparents that will not get on board or aunts and
Mhm.
uncles, and oh gosh, so hard.
It is very, very hard. And, yeah, I would be happy to talk to anybody about that offline, because we could probably have a whole nother episode on that. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it is very, very tough. But again, every single day I'm like, this is my kid. Like,
Yep. Yep.
these are my kids. So, and the more that I, obviously doing this for however many years now, like all these kids, all these families, I think, oh my goodness, like this is who we're advocating for, right?
Yep.
Like they need our love and they need us being present. So,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
that's why your book is so, so important.
Yeah,
Okay,
thank
so
you.
shifting to a completely different scenario, I'd
Yeah.
like to talk about parents who have an LGBTQ child and maybe didn't grow up in conservative religion. They want to embrace them with an open heart, but they might feel like, "Oh no, I'm good. I don't need any guidance at all." Maybe like kind of a secular liberal family that might not realize that they too have absorbed bias from the culture, right? And what are some of the slip ups that you see even this type of parent making, and then how can those be avoided?
Oh my gosh. Okay, I seriously, your questions I love so much, because I literally just had this exact thing happen. I was doing a speaking engagement for a corporation, and they were broadcasting it out to like their different locations. And at the end, I was taking questions, and somebody came on, and so it was like a question that was coming on speaker, and they were like, so we are very evolved in our house, and my daughter did not need to come out to us, because we had no expectations for who she should be, and like went on this like several minute, like,
Wow.
we are very evolved. And so the hour presentation you just gave was unnecessary, essentially. And I was
Wow.
like, so like when they got finished with the whole thing, I said, well, that's incredible. And I'm really impressed. And, obviously you are not exactly who I'm giving all of these tips to. However, I would just offer that, whether we are fully accepting and have no expectations for who our children are going to be in the world, right? Or the other end of that spectrum, our children are still in the world. They're still affected by what's coming at them, right? So whether it's social media, whether it's people at school, whether it's just people in the community, whatever it is, they're still affected by that. So we have to show up and be aware of that and talk about that. Have at bare minimum have conversations about the things that are going on in the world, and acknowledge that that might be causing them, ask them how it's making them feel,
Yeah.
acknowledge that it could be painful, that could make you feel sad, that could make you feel upset, that could, depending on, again, where your child is age-wise and developmentally wise. But yeah, I think that would be that was kind of on the fly that I answered that question
Yeah,
that way, but
that's
I've like
fantastic.
giggled about it since. I was
Yeah.
like, well, I'm super happy that came out because
Yeah.
that's what it is. They are
Yeah.
affected by the world. So we do need to be very conscious of what's coming at them. And that's, why another good reason for us to stay really plugged in and paying attention.
Right. Well, and that actually was my next question. That's a perfect lead in. What are some specific things that parents can do to protect children? I mean, you can't, like, to your point, you can't isolate them from the world. Even if you tried to, it wouldn't be healthy for them anyway. They have to be prepared to go out and live a full, productive life, right? So, how can we talk to children about the things that they might encounter out there which are different from cis and hetero or cis and heterosexual kids?
Right.
How can we protect and then also prepare our kids?
Right. I think it is definitely a little bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, again, this is so like age determinant, but because what you would tell
Yeah.
a 12-year-old is something different you'd tell us an 18-year-old.
Yeah.
But um, I really think that the most important thing you can do is have conversations with your child. So conversations where you're asking open-ended questions to really kind of figure out from them like what they're hearing in their worlds wherever they are. And then for you to really, whether it's through social media, podcasts, just being out in the community, if you work in the community, if you volunteer in the community, whatever it is, just kind of understanding. And I'll give you an example of what I mean, because I feel like that's kind of vague sounding. I live in I call it a bubble. I mean, it's very much I live on the North Shore of Chicago. And so while there is a little diversity, there's not a ton. And so I have, a couple of friends who work within the high school that, share with me things that are being said by students, that are being said by teachers, and kind of getting an idea of what's going on. Like my kids will come home from events and be like, oh, well, this was being said over there. And so making sure like you have your resources for information that are good, solid resources of information, whether it's within your community or like the greater nation and world. And then sharing with your child as you feel is appropriate. So I think that there's a lot of value in having kind of current event conversations in ways that are, not going to be scary for them, but that are offering information and that are offering ways that, if you found yourself in this situation, what would you do? And kind of puzzling that out with them.
Mm-hmm.
And our dinner table is typically that's the place. So I always like give the dinner table. I think that's the easiest place to do it. You kind of have a captive audience. They're eating. It's good.
Mm-hmm.
and it's like just easier to have these like little, it seems lighter. Like you can put it out there instead of like a sit down at the couch where your child's like, oh my gosh, like, what are we doing? Right.
Yeah.
So I think having like role play type, conversations. And then I always I find value, or I found value as my kids have gotten older, and them knowing that our home is a safe space, but that
Mm.
they can kind of use me as either the bad guy or the
Mm.
the person that they need to like. My mom just called and said I need to come
Yes,
home. Um,
totally.
my mom is, being nuts tonight, so I need to go home. Whatever it is, like I'm okay with that. Um, but I think that helps them like have that, like if they
Yeah.
find themselves in a situation that is
Yeah.
like really uncomfortable or things are being said and they don't know how to handle it, knowing that they have that and then they can come home and discuss it with
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah.
and you can come up with a plan for the next time that happens.
I love that. I actually really love that strategy that, like, here's the nest. You fly right back to this nest. Like, when in doubt, if you don't know what to do, and then I mean, for me personally, I love both pieces of that, because the safety of coming back, but then the other half of that, what you just said, I think is so critical. Then we make a plan for next time. Because I think
Right.
sometimes when we want to protect our kids, then, but if we don't prepare them for being able to handle it on their own, then they can become overly reliant on the
They
parent.
can.
And so having both pieces, I think, is just really great.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so too. I
Yeah.
think so too.
So, my final question for you, Heather, is about advocacy and allyship. And in your book, you write that being an ally is not just who you are, it is the action that you take daily. So, what are some of the daily ways that we can practice allyship and better advocate for the LGBTQ youth in our families, in our communities, and in our lives? How can we be better allies?
Absolutely. Oh my goodness, there's so many different ways. And I think, one of the things that you can do is really tap into what your talents are,
Mm,
what your resources are. And I don't mean just financial resources, but I mean like people that you know and places that you have access to. Um, and I think that, you can be an ally in your own home by just showing that you are wanting to learn, that you are learning, right? That you are actively consuming information that is broadening the way that understand who your child is, who the LGBTQ community is. Because, it's one thing to understand who your gay son is. It's then another thing to like move outside of that and say, okay, well, I don't understand. My gay son has a friend who is transgender. I don't really understand that. I want to understand that better.
sure.
And so, that's kind of your base point is really becoming well educated. And that is a great way to be an ally. You can step outside of outside of that and be in the schools, right? Like make sure that your school is a safe place. What things need to be kind of put into place? Are there clubs that are safe for your, like a gay straight alliance, that type of thing? Are What is the administration like at the school? Does your child have a safe person at school they can go to, or a safe place that they can go to? So really feeling that out and advocating if necessary. And depending on where you are in the country, in the world, um, I will say the best place for you. Okay, I'm going to back this up for a second. Um, ACLU.org has a um, running list of all of the bills that are in various forms of legislature across the country. And it's been sitting around like between 500 and 600 for the past couple of years. And most of them, 75% of these bills are anti-trans bills.
Mm.
Um, we had gotten to a point where they were slowly, that number was going down. I fear that that's going to start
Oh,
going the other direction again.
for sure. Yeah.
Um, And so if your talents lie in any way, right, in the legal, in anything legal, in any way of, if you like forming any kind of protests or writing letters to your state legislature, writing letters to there are so many different ways that you can kind of get in this legal fight, legal advocacy. And again, that's a whole other thing that you can become really knowledgeable about. Um, there's just a million different ways. Just understanding, things like on your Zoom, if you were on a lot of Zoom meetings for work, having your pronouns in your signature. What that does is it signals to anybody else on that call that you are a safe place, that they are safe with you. And oftentimes that will, start conversations that, people are curious, right? It kind of helps people feel more curious. Um, Donations are always a great way to be a good ally. If that is, if that's your comfort zone, I know that not everybody is comfortable doing. So if that is what you can do, give. There are so many amazing organizations out there that you can give to,
Mhm.
and they definitely need the money right now.
Yeah, for sure. I'll even throw in too, and you mentioned sharing the pronouns. I know that it's almost like cliche to have a rainbow pin or jewelry, and I know that sometimes people will say like, "Oh, that's not meaningful." I will say that one of my very best friends who's gay just the other day said he went and got his blood drawn for some random thing, and the person who was drawing his blood had a rainbow pin, and he said he noticed his body relax just
Mhm.
seeing it, and he didn't even realize that he was tense until he sat down and saw that and felt his body relax and thought, "Oh, this person that's sticking a big needle into my arm, he respects me. I'm safe with this person." And I thought, I'm so glad to know that, because sometimes I'm just like, is that just performative, or does it's just meaningless?
Right.
But it wasn't meaningless to him. And so I was really
I
glad to hear him say that.
Yes, me too. Because I have often wondered that too, like, wearing a t-shirt or wearing, having something on your bag or whatever. So
Yeah.
that is really great information to have, because yes, that's a very easy way to walk around in the world and mark yourself as an ally in a safe
Yep.
space.
Yeah. Well, Heather Hester, this has been a wonderful conversation. I learned so much from you and from your book. And I guess the last thing I'll ask you is just, where can listeners find your work? Can you share again the title of your book, and then maybe the name of your website, and everywhere where we can follow you?
Absolutely, yes. So the name of the book is Parenting with Pride, Unlearn Bias and Embrace, Empower, and Love Your LGBTQ plus Teen. The longest title ever.
It's
Uh,
fantastic. I love it.
I love it. And then my website is chrysalismama.com, and it's chrysalis like the butterfly cocoon, ChrysalisMama.com. And that everything lives there. So you can find everything there. And the podcast is Just Breathe, Parenting Your LGBTQ Teen. And that's on every platform. So a lot of times, if you just Google my name, Heather Hester, these things will pop up. So all the places you can find me. And I love getting emails, and I love hearing what people think. So yeah, I'm so delighted. Thank you so much for having me today, Amy.
Thank you, Heather.